nistuana kok natui kok sekena kin kern getsen itapi saksiwa tanita stada sese natui koko ata. My name is Regina Crowchild, my English name. I was born a Blood Indian, citizen of the Blackfoot Nation, member of the Black Tribe, but now I'm with Tsuut'ina Nation. Upon marriage, I was transferred to Tsuut'ina. And as a sovereign nation, my dad told me, the Indian agent is going to transfer you to Sarsi. It was known as Sarsi. You will always be a Blood Indian. But now you go home with your husband, you learn the ways of his people and earn your acceptance into that tribe. And that's what I've done, because we are nations. We're still, within close to the Blackfoot territory. There was an alliance between the Sarsis and the Blackfoot. So anyway, my question to you is, and I've been around for a hell of a long time, way before you guys were just little babies when I was in politics. And I can guarantee you that. And
we believe you.
So I know how the Canadian government works. When you're any party is in opposition, they tell us all these sweet words, they're going to do this and that. When they come into power, they forget their promises, or at least they try and find meaningful ways to reach that, like Mr. Scheer says. My question to you is, we, the Indigenous peoples, we have our language, we have our territory, we have our peoples, we have a right of self-determination. We are sovereign peoples. In our treaties, and our treaty number 7 was with the Imperial Crown and not with the federal government, Mr. Singh. We never entered into treaty with the federal government. We have international treaties, not domestic treaties, from where I come from. So as a sovereign nation, and it was in the exercise of our right of self-determination that our peoples entered into treaty. And we were to live side by side without interference. And as you know, 150 years has come. Canada has always interfered into our lives through their legislations. You have legislations now currently within the government of Canada, like the Matrimonial Law Property and the Transparency Act. Those laws interfere into our customs, our practices, and our laws. What are you going to do about them? The Liberal government said they're going to do away with them in their promises. They're going to review them. Nothing has happened. They sent up a ministerial committee and don't allow a few people to come and speak, make a presentation to their committees. So what are you? If those come up, are you going to support us? So my question to you is, do you believe that we are sovereign peoples, that we have a right of self-determination, meaning we enact our traditional laws, our own laws, our government systems. We have a right to government for our peoples, and Canada can no longer interfere in our way of life through their legislations. Mr. Scheer, you said we will find meaningful ways. Well, I really want to know what those meaningful ways are. The English language plays tricks on us because that's not our first language. And there's no way we can translate our words, our own languages, into the English language. It's not there. So my question to you is, do you believe we are sovereign peoples? Do you truly believe that we have a right of self-determination? And would you not allow your legislations to interfere in our lives from here on? Thank you.
Thank you. As we provided the first word to Honourable Scheer, we're going to leave the last word for Honourable Singh, or Mr. Singh. So we're just going to first go to my immediate right here for Honourable Scheer to respond. both questions, if you will, and then we'll
Sure.
both questions with
I'll just address the question that was brought up. We are in the process of putting forward some fundamental principles and platform positions on various things in the lead up to the next election. So you'll understand if today we're not in a position to make specific commitments on specific things that may be raised, but I can assure you that well in advance of the next election, you will know where we will, what we have to offer on very key issues. I can say that on the issue of languages, I've had a very good discussion with Chief Bellegarde. In fact, I don't think the Chief will mind me divulging that one of the things that Perry and I spoke about in our meeting was this particular item. He brought this up with me, and I recognized the position that he was coming from, and it was something that he put in a very thoughtful perspective. He gave me a very thoughtful perspective on that. I've committed to him to coming back to him on the legislation that affects people on both on and on reserve. I understand the spirit in which the question was raised. I will say this, I believe that First Nations people have rights that are acknowledged in treaty and through jurisprudence and through the court system. But I also believe that First Nations people have inherent rights, and that the Government of Canada does, when it does do things like ensure that women living on reserve have the exact same rights that women living off reserve, that is something that I firmly believe in, that it is important to stand up for that principle. And so I understand that sometimes laws are passed that have impacts on that, but I think that is absolutely appropriate that a federal government makes sure that human rights are recognized all across the country, and that women living in abusive situations on reserve should not have less protection than women living off reserve. They should each have the equal level of protection. That is a fundamental principle that I am proud that our government, previous Conservative government, moved on. And the same goes true for accountability. I believe very firmly that First Nations people have a right to know where their money is being spent. You are the chiefs that are entrusted with a great deal of responsibility to look after the people that you represent. And I do believe that just as every other Canadian has the ability to see where the money that is being spent on their behalf is being spent, so too do First Nations living on reserve. So I do believe that accountability on every side of the table, no matter what the discussion is that we're talking about, accountability and transparency are always good things to have part of any type of program, type of spending. And those are things that I believe are important to maintain going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So for the final response, a word from Mr. Singh.
Thank you very much. Check. Is the audio coming out? Yes? No? Yeah, okay, there it is. I feel it now. Okay, so I'll start with the first one on languages. So my mom taught me her language, and there's certain things that I can't say in English that you can only say in my mother tongue, the language taught by my mom. There's certain teachings, there's certain wisdom that flow from the language, and you can only understand the teachings if you understand the language. And so when I look at the languages spoken by the first people of this land, I love that you said you're a warrior for language, Chief, because that's what we need to be. Warriors for language, because the language holds the teachings, the wisdom of thousands and thousands of years of experiences. Those made their way into words, and those words will never have the same meaning if they're translated. They only have the same feeling in the actual original language. And I say that it's not just for First Nations people, Indigenous people. Everyone living on this land can benefit from the teachings and the wisdom of the language. So it's not just a responsibility to ensure that the languages continue to thrive for the First Nations, for the people that speak the language, but for everyone else to benefit from the wisdom of those words and to be able to say them and pronounce them. We all benefit as a society from the richness of the language and the wisdom from the language. So I absolutely support it. It's something we must treasure like a national treasure, and we must make it breathe life back into it with funding and resources so that the languages can thrive, not just survive, but to thrive. This is important. So thank you for bringing the question up. It's fundamentally important. On the second question, the question came down to, do I believe that First Nations people or Indigenous people are sovereign? Yes, no question, sovereign people. And do the First Nations people have a right to self-determination? Yes, absolutely, without a doubt. That's why we've pushed as a party for the adoption of the United Nations recognition of the rights of Indigenous people, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, because it should be recognized that the people of this land are sovereign people. And that's why we have a federation. And First Nations people know this better than so many of us, that in a federation, it's a combination of nations. A federation that we live in is based on the foundation that there's different nations that come together and make agreements, and that provinces have rights and that nations have rights, and we are a combination of all of that. And that's why we must absolutely support the rights. It's inherent and intrinsic that the people that are sovereign should have the ability to govern in a manner that is sovereign, in a manner that respects that right of self-determination. So this is what we believe in firmly. It's what I believe in as leader, and what I hope the bill that Romeo has put forward will help to actually see that enshrined in legislation in Canada. So, absolutely.